Welcome classic rock fans to one of my listing videos, 10 of the best, so to speak. And today I thought it would be interesting to look at my 10 favourite rock vocalists. I would urge you, as always, to please click like, subscribe and check that bell to get notified of any future uploads. And do take a moment to check some of the links below this video for ways you can support the work done here at Classic Album Reviews. Always much appreciated. Anyway, no further ado, coming in at number 10 is Little Richard. Early rock and roll was replete with colourful characters, from the frenzied and unhinged style of Jerry Lee Lewis to the very swivelly Elvis Presley. But for me, it's the ironically named Little Richard that stands out. This guy was something else, considered to be one of the first black crossover artists, often termed as the originator or innovator by many. But that arresting voice of his that leaves you feeling like you've been physically assaulted, and that amphetamine-wide stare. I don't know if he was dosed up or not, but he certainly looked like it. With those emotive vocalizations and the rhythmic thump of that music, he was just absolutely mesmerizing. Theodore Roosevelt said, "Grab your audience by their balls, and their hearts and minds are sure to follow." And my word, he certainly did that. He had a gift for entertainment, and the anarchic and flamboyant style that was rock and roll provided him with a perfect platform. Lemmy famously said that, if you're a gay black man from Macon, Georgia, what else are you going to do? Well, I'm certainly glad he did do what he did, as he's gone on to influence so many great rock stars. If you may forgive me for quoting Wikipedia, he also played a key role in the formation of other popular music genres, including soul and funk. He influenced numerous singers and musicians across musical genres from rock and hip-hop. His music helped shape rhythm and blues for generations. Number 9 is Janice Joplin, arguably a voice that occupies more the paradigms of blues, I guess, but I think there's plenty of hard rocking stuff within the parameters of what she did. Her voice not only had power and expression, but was constantly creaking under the sheer weight of its emotional burden. From the moment those cameras started rolling at the Monterey Pop Festival, it captured her, that unearthly yowl of hers. It was something unearthly, something special that not only propelled her into the limelight, but also her wonderful band, the Big Brother Holding Company. According to Wikipedia, she styled herself partly on sort of blues heroines, but also beat poets. There's no doubt that her use of her voice had its fingers stuck in quite a few various generic pies, I think. But for me, it was those psychedelic textures that really intrigue me with especially with those early albums. Cheap Thrills is a game breaker with a wonderful Robert Crumb illustration. Many believe that Cheap Thrills is a concert recording. Of course, it's not. It was supposed to be presented. That was the conceit, that it was something raw and improvised, when in fact it was. There's only one song on that album that was actually recorded in front of a live audience. That's Ball and Chain. And Ball and Chain is the very epitome of Janice herself, raw and unembellished. The sound effects of breaking glass and audience on songs like Turtle Blues was actually added later on to give the whole thing an almost barroom feel. As a solo artist, of course, with her other bands like the Cosmic Blues Band and the Full Tilt Boogie Band, she was absolutely incredible, despite doing battle with some pretty significant demons. She very much lived the life she represented in her songs, but I guess that's the way it just needed to be. You have to sing about what you know. As Hank Williams famously said, you've got to be able to smell horse shit before you can sing like a hillbilly. Number 8 is Robert Plant. Plant's priapic yop certainly defines the landscape of 1970s rock, with that lion's mane and eye-wateringly tight trousers, which probably assisted him in reaching some of those upper registers. But his voice is beautifully nuanced as well, as demonstrated in those wonderful, bucolic, Tolkien-esque excursions. More incredible string band than James Brown. James Brown, another wonderful singer, by the way. He had a remarkable vocal range, Robert Plant, that is, not James Brown, that could quite easily bother the upper registers. Combine that with his specific way of moving, and he helped define him with Roger Daltrey, perhaps, that whole rock god thing. Perhaps a bit of a cliche now. In terms of his performance, he said that I got a few moves from Elvis, a few from Sonny Boy Williamson and Howlin' Wolf, and just threw them all together. Which surprised me, really, because it's not like Led Zeppelin to borrow anything from anybody else. There's no doubt that Plant is a versatile and remarkable singer, from hard rock to very bluesy numbers, of course. Since I've Been Loving You would be a fine example. I also love the epic Kashmir. His voice can also express vulnerability and has a pleading quality that is extremely beautiful. I'm thinking of Led Zeppelin's Thank You from Led Zeppelin 2, if my memory serves me right. A song that was covered remarkably well, I think, by Tori Amos in the 1990s, if you haven't heard it. Number 7 is David Coverdale. What a remarkable voice he had with that stunning baritone of his, that vocal range, and sings with a bluesy inflection. More bluesy in terms of its register and tone than Ian Gillan, but a voice that was perfectly suited to that shift in direction that Purple were about to make from British hard rock to what Ritchie Blackmore termed as shoeshine music. That voice combined with Glenn Hughes, another wonderful, wonderful singer that deserves to be on this list, by the way. His voice for me has always had an oaken quality, like fine cognac. There's not enough ooze and smooth to describe that seductive croon of his. And his voice just sounds interesting as well. Lots of interesting, very vowely enunciation, but absolutely replete with emotion. I mean, think about the way he sings Mistreated. I mean, it's absolutely spine-chilling. The sheer power and emotion communicated in that song alone is just absolutely remarkable. And I love all those early Whitesnake albums. I don't actually have any on CD anymore, unfortunately. But, you know, Live in the Heart of the City is just wonderful to hear him in full belt. I mean, my word, he certainly had some vocal chops back in the day. For me, his voice is at its very best when he employs that very sensual, crooning quality of his. He's able to communicate so much more, I think. You're on a couple of songs where I think his voice sounds absolutely sublime. Obviously, Purple's Soldier of Fortune, that is just heart-wrenchingly good. And a song, I think, which featured on one of his solo albums many years ago, simply called Only My Soul. Great, great stuff. Number 6 is Ronnie James Dio. I mean, what list like this would be complete without the gothic melodrama of that voice, that sweeping, majestic voice of his, that remarkable vocal range. I mean, he was able to sing, softer, more delicate ballads, but at the same time really lend his voice well to those more heart-driving metallic numbers. When Blackmore heard him singing with Elf, I believe, I think he certainly sussed that he was onto a good thing. Elf, of course, supported Deep Purple in the early mid-70s. Of course, Dio had previously sung on Roger Glover's project, The Butterfly's Ball and The Grasshopper's Feast, which was probably about 74, if I'm not mistaken. Could be wrong there with my dates. And those early Rainbow albums are just so beautifully majestic, incredible, incredible albums. Until, of course, in the words of Ronnie James Dio, Ritchie Blackmore decided he wanted to be a pop star. Then unfortunately threw the baby out with the bathwater. But he also brought a theatricality to his performances, where he'd use his body and movements and gestures to, with that wonderful voice, help articulate whatever he was singing. But the key ingredient, of course, was that voice. I mean, Roger Hammerstein famously said, "A bell isn't a bell until you ring it." And my God, what a chime he had. In terms of Sabbath vocally, he was a step up from Ozzy Osbourne, in my opinion. You think of songs like Sign of the Southern Cross. I mean, need I say more? But I just love those very medieval-themed early records of his and the stuff he did with Rainbow. Number 5 is Ian Gillan. Of course, Gillan joins Deep Purple after leaving Episode 6. And my word, what a fine set of tonsils he brought to that band. I love his voice on his early Episode 6 records, but more specifically the way it helps shape the sound of that seismic and influential of albums in rock, where the band Deep Purple, you see them transitioning from wanting to try and sound like Vanilla Fudge to embracing a more hard rock British sound. And Gillan's voice and that glass worrying shriek of his certainly fitted him well. I really wish they'd remaster and remix those Gillan albums, and a remix of Sabbath's Born Again would be most welcome. When we talk about Gillan, we tend to talk about him in the context of Deep Purple, with that unearthly sound of Lord's Hammond, of course, combining beautifully with wonderful rhythm section of Pace and Glover. Pace, an underrated rock drummer if ever there was one. And Gillan's vocal performances, standout performances, of course there are many. I'd have to go with things like Speed King, Highway Star, and of course Child in Time. Number 4 is Freddie Mercury. No list of this kind could possibly exclude Freddie Mercury, I think, with that high camp operatic posturing of his and that voice, that operatic voice that makes him one of the greatest rock singers ever, in my opinion. With a slew of anthemic, audience pleasuring numbers under his belt. Sounds disgusting, doesn't it? And and a spate of costumes, of course, borrowed from the Village People in the late 70s. I mean, he certainly made an impression. I mean, Queen's performance at Live Aid was the stuff of legend, there's no doubt about that, with Freddie strutting about like a cockerel on Benzedrine, surveying his territories. I mean, he's just superb no matter how he uses his voice. I mean, I rather like the sort of subdued ones he sang as well, like Killer Queen, or the breathy Love of My Life, or the jelly-haired crazy little thing called Love. But in terms of sheer power, I mean, you have to think of songs like Spread Your Wings, the Prophet song, Save Me. They're just absolutely sublime, darlings, sublime. Yep, there's no doubt about it, Freddie has to make this list. Number 3 is Paul Rodgers. It seemed almost effortless, the way he used to sing with that wonderful velvety tone of his, almost hypnotic in quality. I think one critic has described his voice as like being dipped in caramel. There's no doubt that that lack of strain, I think, has probably aided the lifespan of that wonderful, wonderful voice. If you listen to something like Come Together in the Morning by Free or Seagull off the Bad Company album, these are just absolutely mesmerising. Rodgers' voice often occupied that very powerful mid-range, often referred to as the voice of rock. I have to say, I never felt that his voice was a particularly good fit for Queen. I just do not think they went well together. Queen's music is much better suited to the vocal pyrotechnics of Adam Lambert, but his voice undoubtedly has a quality to it that certainly beguiled Richie Blackmore, who saw Paul Rodgers as a perfect fit for replacing Ian Gillan back in the day. For me, what's interesting is the way he's used his voice over the years. I think with Free, his voice had a grittier, wilder, freer quality of, if you excuse the pun, often, not afraid to belt out numbers like Mr. Big, for example, from the Fire and Water album, if I'm not mistaken, could be wrong there. But I think by the time you get to Bad Company, his voice is much cleaner, more straightforward and more restrained on those albums. Number 2 is Steve Walsh. I mean, listening to his early Kansas records, you just can't help but be mesmerised by that guy's vocal prowess, vocal range and dynamics, and the emotion as well. It's just so effective and affecting, especially on epic numbers like Icarus, Wings of Steel, where his voice just soars. I mean, how appropriate. Song for America is another great, great one. I mean, there's just too many songs to list where Steve Walsh is just incredible. Bjork famously said that singing is a celebration of oxygen, and it could certainly be applied here, the way Walsh uses his voice. His voice suffered, I think, later on in life as age and ill health, as well as the ravages of the rock and roll lifestyle took their toll. But, listen to that live Kansas album, 2 for the Show, I think it's called. He's just in fine form on that album. As well as, as a guest vocalist on the Steve Hackett, very American-tinged record he did, Please Don't Touch. He's great on that as well. But you get something like Dust in the Wind, where his voice is full of pathos and yearning, doing justice with the very emotive quality of the lyrics, as well as being able to belt them out with the anthemic Carry On Wayward Son, a song that really pushed this band to the very, very top. Number 1 is Lou Gramm. I mean, this guy is one of the greatest voices of all, cited by Ian Anderson as being perhaps one of the best singers within the paradigms of rock. And this guy has it all, the power, the range, and that perm. I mean, those earlier Foreigner records are just absolutely stunning, in large because of that wonderful, wonderful voice of his that turns these songs into something else. Jukebox Hero has power and conviction to the very soft, nuanced refrain of a number like Waiting for a Girl Like You, to the soul-singeing I Want to Know What Love Is. This guy was definitely the real deal. His high tenor is absolutely stunning. I read somewhere that his voice can range something like 3.5 octaves. I don't know if that's true or not, but he has phenomenal pitch and paired with a great melodic and nuanced sense of expression. Something that was perfectly suited to those beautiful early Foreigner numbers. Sinead O'Connor famously said that singing is not about notes and scales, but it's about emotion. And my God, that voice was virtually dripping with it. Anyway, there you have it. That's my 10 favourite rock singers. If you've got this far in the video without switching off, I'd like to thank you for doing just that, and hope you're all well. Keeping warm, of course, as winter approaches, but more importantly, that you keep listening.